let me ask you a question, and I'll do this in front of the mic. Normally, when I do these two sessions, I have 3 hours. So I know all of you got the 9:15 to 11:15 time. I'm going to do my very best to make it through in 2 hours. But to make it through in 2 hours, I violate one of my core beliefs, and that is the best time to ask a question is when you have the question. And so, what I'll try to do, I love to engage and get people thinking and talking about what we're going to talk about. So I want to give you that freedom, but also I don't want to be held accountable to finish at 11:15 if I've given you the freedom and we've all kind of benefited from it. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I will press on. Let me say this right at the beginning that would be helpful, I think, is if you will email me, and my email is mark, M-A-R-K, at markhowelllive.com. If you'll email me 2 L's, Howell Live, so you got 3 when you include the L from the live, markhowelllive.com. If you'll email me, I'll email you back a link to a special page that I created on my blog. It's not secret, it's just for this topic, these 2 topics. And I've got probably 30 links on that page that support what we'll talk about today. So if you miss something, if you don't ask a question, if you'll just email me and say, hey, I was at the thing, I'll email you back the link, and you'll have what you need to find out a little bit more about how it works. The first thing I'm going to talk with you about is this one, building a thriving small group ministry. And let me kind of walk you through a concept that I think will serve you. It kind of goes like this. When I'm thinking about this whole concept of building a thriving small group ministry, one of the first things I do is set up these 3 assumptions that we should at least think about. You may not agree with me, but I want you to think this way. Assumption number 1 is, it is what it is, and I kind of use a Andy Stanley quote to support this. And you might, if you follow me on the blog, you also have memorized this quote because it's very informative. And what Andy said is that your ministry is perfectly designed to produce the results you are currently experiencing. Now, let me say Shannon and I drove here. You met Shannon, he's the Lifeway guy. We drove over here this morning from our hotel. And along the way, Shannon had his own personal story to talk about how it's going in the church plant that he serves 10 hours a week. And, I didn't say this quote back to Shannon, but this ran through my mind as I heard him talk about, for example, the weather is what keeps us from doing what we set out to do, because we had a 29-degree day and we had monsoon weather and all this blah, et cetera, et cetera. But what Andy pointing out in this quote is that really it's about design. Really, the results that you're getting have everything to do with the design of what you're trying to do. And rather than looking for a culprit, we should all be just saying, well, okay, truth here. It turned out this way because of the design, okay? The second thing is that I love this line, what got you here won't get you there, and there's been a number of books that have kind of posited this idea, but the great Albert Einstein line that, the significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. One of the things that is, fascinating to me, I worked at Fellowship of the Woodlands, now Woodlands Church in the Houston area, and I was there from years 3 through 10. So it was a brand new church. I got there in year 3. I was there for 7 years. And I went from that church, it was the fastest growing church in North America in the 90s. I went from there to a 108-year-old Lake Avenue church in the outskirts, kind of suburban Los Angeles, Pasadena. And 108 years old, you can imagine the history and the, built up layers of here's how we do it here. And I didn't meet very many of the founding members, but I met some of their family, and people that had been there for literally 100 years. And so what they talked about was, here's how we do it. And what I talked about was, well, guess what? We're living in here we are in the 21st century. Welcome. Let's play. What do we need to do now? So what I would encourage you to think about is in your church, you may have had eras of very successful ministry. You might have had seasons where you really, you were hitting home run after home run, and you were the, more like the Rays than the Marlins. You were really drilling it. And now, here you are. How'd that go over? Are you guys Marlin fans here in this area or not? No?
Nobody
is a Marlin fan?
If they were winning.
Yeah.
That's funny. All right, so then assumption number 3, I want to sit on this for just a second, because if you've not absorbed this, how many of you guys read my blog already? Is there some? And so some of you you've never seen what I'm writing, and you're here. Thank you for coming. If you these guys drove 4 hours. I'm still trying to prove that it's worth it, by the way. So one of the things that I talk about on my blog all the time is that there is no problem free. Every possible strategy, every possible system, every way of doing anything comes with a set of problems. And in my evaluation of this, I really believe that the pursuit of problem-free delays more ministry than anything else. Looking for the way to do it that doesn't have any problems, it delays everything. Now, when you come into the design of a small group ministry with the idea that there's no problem free, what smart people do is they just say, okay, this way of doing it comes with a set of problems, this way of doing it comes with a set of problems, this way of doing it comes with a set of problems. Smart people just pick the set they'd rather have. And so, like, for example, if you just posed small groups on campus, aka Sunday school, or small groups off campus, or a blend, or you could see that you've got every one of those things has a set of problems. One of the things I was talking with Shannon about today is that the building they meet in is tapped out. They don't have any more room. And I don't know how true that is. How's that true? Is that true here, you guys that go to Christ Fellowship? Are you guys tapped out on campus? And so you've got this architecture where you've built the building and you've got it all going on, but you get to a point where it is you can't get people to go at off times in North America. It's a consumer culture. They're going to go when they want to go, and if it's full, they're not going to come at a different time just because you want them to come in the middle of the night. If we were in South Korea, maybe. We're not. So problem-free, that there is no problem-free is a very important assumption, because then when you come in for the design of your small group strategy, what you're going to say is not what's the perfect one that has no problems. What you're going to say is, which set of problems would we rather have? This is right at the heart, for example, of the idea of the contrast between Saddleback's revolutionary low bar of entry level from the standpoint of who can lead a group. So you've got that. Does that come with problems? Yes. Yes. it's also the reason they had 8,400 small groups do Transformed. 8,400. You pose that though against the idea that which is very common, is that in order to lead a group, you have to go through a multiple layer qualification that is popular in some places. And so, the idea that there'd be training in advance, the idea that there'd be, a background check, the idea that there would be, you have to have 3 references, all those kind of things. This also comes with a set of problems. They're different, but generally speaking, their problems are we can't find enough leaders. You with me? All right, so let me kind of push on, and what I'm going to show you is a diagram, a way to think about and kind of diagnose what you're doing, what's happening in small group ministry at your church. But let me kind of broaden it out and just say this. This concept that I'm about to show you really applies not even just to ministry. This is not just about small groups. This is about structural design. This is about the way of doing things that would be true whether you're talking about children's ministry or, the whole church, or this would be true even if you were in a business. And in fact, this diagram came from a weird book called The Future of Revenue. And I loved the diagram, and so I've used it for now probably 10, 12 years. But what I want to show you is the way the diagram looks, so that if you find a blank spot on your page and you're drawing this, or you brought another piece of paper, you will anticipate where this is going. So I'm going to just click through and click back so that you see how it is. The diagram, when it's drawn out, it looks like that, but there's actually one more piece that's below the word present, and so you kind of need to draw the word present on your page about 1/3 of the way up and start from there. You with me? So, anybody not with me? How many of you are wishing that right now you were getting a coffee? Anybody? All right. Let me just kind of go here, and I'm gonna walk you through how this works. And think with me about this. One of the things that we talked about earlier is the Andy Stanley line that your ministry is perfectly designed to produce the results you're currently experiencing. So one of the most productive things we could do is just be really honest about how small groups are doing at our church. And I met Martha earlier. Do you guys even have small groups yet, or is this is coming, but you don't have it? Okay, so there's that. How many of you guys have groups and they are awesome, and you've connected 140% of your weekend adult attendance, and you're just slamming it? Anybody? Me either. I'm going there, but I'm not there yet. Okay. But one of the things that you must do in the early stages is really be honest about the present, because if you're not honest about what's going on now, then what happens is everything else is a fantasy, and so like what I'm talking about honest now is first of all, start with the percentage connected. How many people, what is your average adult attendance on the weekend? And how many people do you have that are really, really, really in a group? Okay, now full disclosure, let's be honest about what it means to be connected. Okay, I'm not talking about the people that are on the roll. So if you're, I'm a Southern Baptist by background, that's you might still live in the era when you're talking about the membership versus reality, which is how many people are there. Okay. But what I want you to do right now is think about connected from the standpoint of really being known, okay? So like, they would have to meet and conversate and talk and connect, communicate, all those kind of things. They would have to do that often enough to be considered connected. Do that often enough to where if something happened to them or a member of their family, somebody else in their group would know about it without anybody calling the church. Right? So they can't meet monthly, okay? That's not connected. They can't really meet in a row where they don't connect during the time, because if they're not have the opportunity to talk about what's going on in my life, are they really connected? Or are they just there and they check the box? You with me? So percentage connected is important. Now let me broaden that out one more piece and say, if your church is like mine, and I suspect that it is, people are not there every week. Okay, so average adult attendance is important to know, but if your church is like mine, when you come, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks from now, when it's Easter, you're going to find out how many adults go to your church. Okay, when you think back to Christmas Eve services, if you have those, that's the real number. Okay, average adult attendance is good. That's helpful, but that's not the real number. Okay, so let's take the church that has 500 adults on average weekend attendance, and maybe you've got 100 people or 200 in groups where they genuinely are connected. That looks like 40%. But if that same church has 750 adults for Christmas or for Easter, that should give you a more legit sense of what percentage connected. Are you with me? You guys tracking? Now, this is important because of this. Unconnected people that aren't in a group, are always one tough thing away from never being at your church again, ever. All they have to have is a divorce. They just have to lose their job. They just have to have a serious health issue. They just have to have a kid, a teenager that goes south. Any of those things, these unconnected people are not the ones that call the office and want a counseling appointment, generally. The people that do that are the ones that are connected because they know you and they know you offer that and those kind of things. Unconnected people just disappear. And so when you're thinking about the present, you need to think really hard about the percentage of people who are not connected. And you need to get to the place where you realize that one of the realities from the standpoint of the present is that there's a window of opportunity that's going away. 1 week, 2, 3, there went some people. 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6, there went some more. And you get new people coming, and so it looks like you're still taking care of them, but the reality is this is a very serious thing, you guys. And so rather than harp on it, let me just kind of press on. There's other things that you need to think about from the standpoint of present are things like the messaging. Now, I'm not talking about the sermon. I'm talking about communication and the way you talk about, the importance of being in a group. I'll give you an example. If in your communication from the front or on the website or in the bulletin or anything like that, you're talking about the importance of being connected, but what you're offering people in the menu of ways that they can be connected makes it sound like it's the same to be in a monthly group as it is to be in a weekly group, or it makes it sound like to be in a class that meets in a row is the same as a way to connect as it is if you're sitting around in a circle and you really are doing life with one another. Does that make sense? So the messaging is really important, and I would say too the clarity of thinking about how to get from the auditorium and anonymity to life on life, how to make that move. If I have to be Karnak the magician or some kind of like psychic to figure out how to get from your website homepage to the place where I actually find out about this, that's about messaging. And so when you think about that, think about budget and staff. Now, when you're thinking about this drawing, it can really be important to say this could be about anything. It doesn't have to be just about small group ministry, but today we're talking about that. So when you think about small group ministry, what I would say is, I think it's a fair question. Do you have staff? How many, what percentage of their portfolio, goes to this? What's the budget? I think senior pastor commitment is really key. Okay, so anyone else a senior pastor besides my St. Cloud friend today? All right, so think about this. Senior pastor commitment is huge to evaluate. And by that I mean, one of the realities, for example, when you listen in to Rick Warren at Saddleback or Andy Stanley at North Point, or the churches that really model effective small group ministry, what you hear is a drumbeat from the senior pastor over and over. They're in a group, they're talking about their group, they're talking about life in community. It's important to them. Okay, when you're thinking about the present, what I want you to do is diagnose that. Think about it, talk about it, think about it. How does it really come across? Okay, now we could talk about the present for a long time. One of the links that I'm going to send you is a link to a really cool diagnostic tool called the 4 Helpfuls. And it's not my idea, it's part of a consulting practice known as the Patterson Group, and it really does a great job of illustrating the present, diving into it. So if you'll email me, mark@markhowelllive.com, I'll send you that back, okay? All right, so, and then one thing here is make sure you're diagnosing the real present, not the fake one. So, when in 2004 and 5, I worked with a group from the consulting group called Life Together. And we talked literally with hundreds of churches that had done the first generation of 40 Days of Purpose. And, the 40 Days of Purpose 2002 was screaming, it was churches were doing that by the hundreds every year, if not thousands, because they got to the end of that run and it was like close to 30,000 churches had done 40 Days of Purpose. There's a lot of churches, okay? But what I found when we would come back in later is you'd find a bunch of them and you'd say, how many groups do you guys have? And what they would be reporting is the number of groups they had when they did 40 days. They launched 70 new groups and it went right back down. But when they talk to you, they're talking about memory. And what I want you to do when you're diagnosing the present is don't think about high water. Don't think about, best case scenario. Think about reality right now. What is it? How many groups? Fact or feelings, not best case, truth. Sometimes that's a hand-to-hand combat. It's really about a survey. Who's your group meeting? How often do you guys connect offline? It's asking the questions that will really reveal not hopeful, but reality. Now, here's the key on the diagram. And what I want you guys to do is think this way. Okay, the reason that I spend an hour going through this diagram is I want you to really spend probably a day wrestling with some of these concepts. This is very important for this reason. The way things are today predicts within 5 to 10% probably the way things will be down the road if nothing changes. So if you keep going down the road you're on, guess what? What you're looking at today is pretty much what it will be like. I'm talking about size. I'm talking about symptoms. So if, for example, today you would say the messaging at our church is foggy and unclear, if you don't really work hard to correct that, if you don't work hard to really make it clear, in 10 years, it will be the same. You'll still wrestle with the same problems. Now, one thing I always like to point out, though, is that when you move down the road, organizations do one thing. They get more complicated. So if you think right now about how hard it is to actually explain, to the people, you're doing an announcement, you're in a message, you're talking, on the bulletin, on the website, and what you're saying is, we want you to take this next step, but you think about the political nature of what you're actually saying, and you know that you've got these stakeholders over here who still like this way of doing it. And then you're trying to get everybody connected. So the way announcements actually go is, hey, there's a bunch of ways you can get connected at our church. And you're still talking about this over here, even though they're full. They haven't added a new person in generation. You need people to do this, because this will get them connected, but you don't want to hurt their feelings. Okay, so if you don't change, when you get out there, you should expect it to look very much like it looks right now. Does that make sense with me? All right, so now, when you're thinking, though, about what could happen, this is very important. And if you think about your church, think about your team, think about the people that might really be passionate about group life. You might have some people like I do at Canyon Ridge that are very inventive. They're creative. They think about things that are outside of the box, and they think about ways of doing things that are intriguing because they're not normal. They're like, wow, oh, wow, that's awesome. I love that. You need to pull some people together and think about what's possible. How could we do groups that would be different than they are now? What model could we embrace? It's okay to kind of look at systems. It's okay to look at what other people are doing and kind of think about what all the possibilities. The example that I use on this talk all the time is in 2004 and 5, I led 2 cohorts for Life Together. And the 2 that I led were for churches that were over 1,500 in weekend attendance. And I had 25 to 40 churches in this one, and I had 25 to 40 churches in this one. And we were really just on the conference call weekly, and then we would have a series of one-on-one calls with the people that were in our cohort. And I had a church that was in one of my 2 cohorts, and it was so bizarre. This was in 2004, and their email ended with .tv. It's really weird. I've never seen that. Didn't know what is .tv, And they were from this church in Oklahoma, and they were Life Church, and I never heard, 2004, seriously, nobody knew about Life Church. I had these 3 guys that were part of my conversation, and as we talked about it, and I would meet with them on the phone, talk through things that we had just discussed, and how can we do this in our context, and I'm thinking Oklahoma. And they're thinking, no, we're going to have more than one campus. And I'm thinking Oklahoma City, and they're thinking, no, we need to be able to make this happen even like in Arizona. We need to make this happen far beyond our little locale. And as they started talking about what they were thinking about, and then we watched what happened over the last 10 years. They were pulling together a dream session that went way beyond what they were thinking now. You need to do that. You don't have to have multi-site, you don't have to have online groups, any of those kind of things. You need to get some people around your table and think about how would it work. I love a line from Andy Stanley this last 10 months or so where he's talking about what's the best way to connect. So we are having this conversation at Canyon Ridge. When I got there, by the estimates that we did, we had around 10,000 adults who were part of our congregation. They weren't there every week. Trust me, in Las Vegas, people don't come to church every week. So they were there, though, and if you talk to them anywhere in town, you said, where do you go to church? First of all, 9 out of 10, if not 90 out of, 91 would laugh, and they would say, we don't go to church. But the ones that say they go to church in our area, they'll say, a lot of them will say, well, I actually go to Canyon Ridge, or they'll say, I go to the church that's, it's at the corner of Lone Mountain and Jones. It's the church that has the GF stickers. They don't even know the name. Okay, but what we discovered was, we had about 1,200 people who were connected, and out of 10,000. And the urgency radar went way up. And I started talking about, okay, wait a minute, you got to think this way, you guys, because those people, they're just one thing away, one tough thing away. They're never going to be here again. So we got after it. We had a dream session. We started thinking. They recognized some things, the rest of the team there. And I want you to do this too. I want you to think really hard about the present, be honest about it, recognize where it will go, and then think about the possible future, because this does things like this. When you recognize the cataclysmic reality of what's going on in your present, you stop thinking about things that are current barriers. You start thinking differently about what you might need to do in order to connect those people. Does that make sense? All right, so let me press on. And let me point out, so there's a third piece here. The, probable, understandable, possible, all the things that could work, all the things that might be worth considering. This preferred is what I want you to see. And I want you to notice a couple things about it. First of all, it includes some of the probable. Because some of what you're doing right now is working. It's good, it's healthy. Some of the things that you're doing today is really good. And so part of the probable is in the preferred future. Also, the possible. The possible, as you think about this, as you evaluate, and think about all the ways that you could do this, some of what's possible, you're going to say, oh yeah, we could do that here. We could do this. We could set it up to where it would have this impact. But I want you to notice one thing. Some of what is in your preferred future is actually outside of what you would currently say is possible. And let me just give you an example from technology. This is an iPhone 5. Real Eric Geiger has not yet responded. This is an iPhone 5. 10 years ago, guess what? Not possible. 10 years ago, the closest thing you would find to something like this was on Star Trek. Right? 10 years ago, no one was doing a video chat on a thing like this. Some smart people thought about what is coming, possible, and they started dreaming about what was just beyond it. So, I'll give you a real world example from the land of groups. 12 years ago, on the first iteration of 40 Days of Purpose, when you signed up on that first weekend to host a group, that was born of desperation, because the weekend before, a team of people got together and they said, Rick Warren asked them, how many groups are you going to be able to start using your current strategy? And they were using the connection idea then, which was a great strategy, still is a great strategy. But they said, we think we can start 300 new groups using the connection strategy. And Rick had met with the prayer of Jabez guy the day before, Bruce Wilkinson. And Rick said back to Brett Eastman and the rest of the crew, you need to add a 0 to the 300. And they said, we can't start that many groups. And Rick said, then you're using the wrong strategy. Go think about it. They came back and they said, what if we just ask people to, if they have a heart for unconnected people and they'd be willing to open their home for 6 weeks and serve some refreshments and turn on the VCR. Back in the day, that's what the T stood for. Okay, so Rick, they came back to Rick and he said, awesome. What kind of people are going to sign up to do that? And how can we mitigate the risk that they might be an axe murderer? Okay, and so they put some hoops in place and they said, okay, Anyone can sign up. They're going to get a letter and it says, thanks for signing up. It's going to be from Rick, and he's going to say, awesome, I love your heart. Please join us at the next class 101. Here's the date. People came to that. They said, awesome, love that you're here, and your next step is to be baptized. Because in order to host in the first iteration in 2002, you had to be a member. Anybody could sign up, but in order to complete that journey, you need to be a member. Okay, 2002, guess what it is now? Not that. If you have 2 friends, you could do this. Stop off at the campaign center on the patio, pick up the curriculum. We'll give you everything you need. It's in our budget. And you can start a group. Now, we're not sending you any people, because if I'm the host and I'm inviting 2 people, what does that make me? A leader of them anyway. Whether I'm a Christian or not. Actually, Steve Gladen was telling me this 2 weeks ago. They had such a great things happened in Transformed. One of the great things that happened were multiple hosts who became Christians during the campaign and led their groups to do the same thing. And they had quite a baptism at the host rally. Because those people, that's what they said. Hey, if you made a commitment to follow Christ and you haven't been baptized, this is at the host rally. Midway through the thing. At the host rally, they're saying, if you've made a commitment to Christ, you haven't been baptized, we've got the water hot, join us right outside. We've got trunks, we've got towels, we've got everything you need right out there, and they baptized a lot of those people that said, I'll open my home 6 times. I'll invite a couple of my friends. What a difference. That was not conceivable back then. And so as they've thought about what could we do, what's the preferred future? The preferred future actually includes things that are they're not technologically possible. They're not even, I hesitate to say they're not theologically possible, because honestly, I think what happened at Saddleback with Transformed emulates very well what happened in the first century. If you think that the first century people who followed Jesus around were Christians, were followers, were disciples, they were not. They were unbelievers who were intrigued by what Jesus was doing. And they were finding his words to be transformative and life-changing. And they followed him, and then when he rose from the dead, that was a game changer. You with me? So this is very important. When you think about this diagram, have the discussion. So for example, one of the things we've talked about is what's the preferred future for coaches? And we've gotten very specific about what does that look like? And to be a coach, one of the things that we know is true is whatever we want to happen in the lives of the members of our groups, whatever we want them to experience, has to have happened first to the leader. In other words, if I want the members of these groups to know what it's like to have a leader that really prays for them, knows their family, I don't know what it's like in Miami. I think I do. There's people who have been here for a long time in Florida, but there's a lot of people that are that are transitory. They move in and out. And I wonder if this area is like it is in Vegas or in Southern California or in Houston where I was, where almost nobody has family right by them. Now there are people that do, but there's a ton of people that don't know anybody. Okay, so when I think about this reality, what do I want the members to know? What do I want the members to experience? One of the things I desperately want them to have in Las Vegas is the sense of family. How are they going to get that if the leader doesn't have it? The leader you can't give away something you don't have, right? What that means in our culture, in our small group culture, is that means the coach must do things in the life of the leader that's about giving them a sense of family. And so we've told all of our coaches part of the preferred future for them is a very important thing, is you need to know the families of the leaders that you coach. You need to know their kids. You need to know, what their goals are, what their struggles are. You need to know that about the leaders that you coach. Otherwise, how are you going to give them? How are you going to give them what they need? You can't. So we in a very detailed fashion, went all the way through what do we want for leaders? What's the preferred future for leaders? What does it look like in our thing? Now, granted, we are aggressively launching groups. We have no fear or constraint about starting groups if you've got 2 friends. We're just like Saddleback. But that's not what we want them to be forever. So we're making it as easy as it can be to start and as predictable as it can be for them to continue. I was telling Steve Gladen 2 weeks ago in our conversation that I want it to be like getting on an escalator. I want it to be super easy to step on and automatic to move you in the direction I want you to go. So you have to do things counter to what the escalator wants you to do in order to get off the track. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so I want to keep pressing on. Now, I want to show you a very important thing, because what I'm really posing for you guys is the idea that whatever is true right now, whatever is going on right now in your small group ministry, hopefully what you're looking at, and the reason you're here today, is that you don't want it to stay that way. You have bigger dreams, you want more leaders, you want to connect more people, you want to kind of leverage your opportunities and so that you can connect. One of the things, I will say this, the difference between the way Saddleback did things in 2002 and in 2014 is the reason that they've connected so many people from the cul-de-sac. Now, if you think about it from the standpoint, one of the drawings that I use a lot of times is if you could imagine a circle, and in the middle of that circle, just imagine like a binder, or a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper or something, and just imagine maybe a round table, the way to think about it. You think about it for your church, just imagine that round table represents your Easter adult attendance. You with me? So the round table is the Easter adult attendance. And let's say that square piece of paper represents the number of people in your congregation that are truly, truly connected. You with me? So you can think about it. And what that means is, again, if something happens to them or a member of their family, someone else in their group knows about it within 24 hours without anybody calling the church. So that sets the parameters for what this very tight group is. Now, what I want you to think about is this. If you were to interview those people that make up that square, they're truly connected. Sometimes I add another variable in and I say, in order to fit in square 2, you have to have someone who's building into you from a spiritual standpoint, and it's not a pastor, in order to fit in the square. So it has to be a small group leader or another member in your group, or maybe you serve on a serving team and your serving team leader really pours into you. So they've got 2 things going for them. These truly connected people, they've got it going for them that they really are connected. They're known. And on top of that, they've got someone who's investing in them on a constant basis from a spiritual standpoint. Does that make sense? Now here's what I want you to see. You think about those people in that square. If you went to them and you interviewed them and you said, who are your 10 best friends in Miami? People in the square. Who are your 10 best friends in St. Cloud? Okay, people in the square. You know what they would tell you? 8, 9, or 10 of them are also inside the square. So the people they're hanging out with are the people that are just like them. They're connected. If anything happened to any of them, other people in that square would find out about it within 24 hours without anybody calling the church. That's good. We want that for people. We want them to have that. But here's the other part to this. If you talk to the people that are in the circle, but not the square, and you say, who are your 10 best friends? in St. Cloud? Who are your 10 best friends in Miami Lakes? Who are your 10 best friends, in Miami? What they'll tell you, very informative. 8, 9, or 10 of their friends have never been to your church. But on Friday night, when they pull the barbecue grill out into the cul-de-sac, and the other neighbor brings the cooler, they're doing life with a people group that have never been to your church. Who do you want to host a group? These people in the square, they only know each other. You know people like that? Now, let me just say, disclaimer. One of the things that always comes up in a meeting like this is that's not the way you are. Because you're intentionally meeting the barista and you're, getting to know the people when they move into your street and stuff like that, even though you're already connected. But that's not the way the church member or the church attendee is. If they're in a group, pretty soon, and this is actually one of the things that I struggle with the closed group idea in the North Point people, is that when you sign up to be in a group that's essentially closed for 12 to 18 months, guess what? These people matter less and less. Now, North Point has a workaround for that. Full disclosure. It's a good workaround. But you see where I'm going? Okay, so now, what I want you to think about when I tease this out is I want you to think this way. The shift from this, you see, right? This is a trajectory. It leads to the probable future. You see this line right here? That is a trajectory. It leads to the probable future. If you want to shift over to the trajectory that leads to the preferred future, it is a lot of work. Have you guys ever tried to change the way something is in your church? This is, a lot of times I think about this when I moved from Fellowship of the Woodlands, because even at, 8,000 on the weekend or something like that, it was not unusual for our pastor to come in on a Friday and say, you know what I was thinking about Sunday? Or I was thinking about what we talked about, remember what we've been planning the last 3 months, and I had kind of an insight. And I think we should do it a different way. You just want to kill those people. You ever sense death threats around you? You just want to kill them. But guess what? A lot of times it worked out. But it was mayhem. It was crazy. When I moved from there to 108-year-old Lake Avenue, just imagine how deeply ingrained the trajectory was that they were on. So like one of the things I remember happened to me, I'd been there about 2 months at Lake Avenue, and not even a small group thing, but I'd been there a couple months and I was in an all-staff meeting and we were talking about Easter, which was about 60 days away. And, the executive pastor was kind of getting the department heads in this all-staff meeting of about 100 people, go around, the department heads go around and say, what are your Easter plans? And I'll never forget, it's probably, I should have been on medication then, but it came to the one person and they said, what are your plans? And they said, well, we're going to give all of our volunteers the weekend off so they could be with their families. And I had just come from Fellowship of the Woodlands, where really hair on fire, do whatever it takes to reach people, because listen, friends, we're in a dying world, and this is not, there's no sabbaticals at Fellowship of the Woodlands, okay? It's always on. I came from that world. I came to this one where they said, we're going to give our volunteers the weekend off. This was for kid workers from 2 years old and older. So they were conceiving this idea of having everybody in the auditorium, which, hey, I get it, I understand, but you're with me, right? So I could not help it. My hand went up, and I said, and the executive pastor said, Mark, you probably have a perspective. I said, dude, you have got to be kidding me. And he said, why? Tell us why you think that. And I spent the next 10 minutes on a tirade about what would happen at Fellowship of the Woodlands, because Easter, still in 2014, is a great opportunity to reach unchurched people. It is, if you do the right things. But for what I was proposing to them would have happened on a Friday at Fellowship of the Woodlands. In other words, Terry could have come in and said, hey, I just talked to blah, 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 and they're doing this. I think we should do this. Can we make that happen in 24 hours? And we could, because it mattered. But to them, 60 days ahead of Easter, the idea that we're not going to do it that way, we're going to do it this way, not a chance. Because this is so ingrained, deep, deep, deep trajectory. So the reason that I say that is to say, guess what? If you want to move to a new trajectory, it takes an intentional, aggressive, hard-working, purposeful move that is not comfortable. Often you are asking for things to happen that really go counter to some very important, stuff in the architecture of the church that you're at. So I joked earlier, I tweeted, and I think I might have gotten a response. One of the things that I tweeted earlier today is, if you're not from Christ Fellowship Miami, you may not know, the book Simple Church was a very popular book probably 7 years ago, 6, 7 years ago. And Eric Geiger, who was on the staff here at Christ Fellowship, is the co-author. And so when I got out of the van in the parking lot, I said, I'm going to tweet, I am at Christ Fellowship Miami, home church of real Eric Geiger. And then I said, think it's a simple church. And I'm just, I love jacking with Eric. And so I thought that would be fun. But, what I would say is, when Eric wrote that book, he gave the impression that a lot of effort had gone into streamlining the menu and being more intentional about the way things are. Now, how old is this church, Christ Fellowship Miami? Anybody know?
Yeah, it first started in, it's over 90 years old.
Okay, so 90 years old. So think about when you change from this trajectory to this one, think about how hard that is in a 90-year-old church. When I did the same workshop in Dallas, there was a church there had driven over from Austin. And they were not in Austin, but they were in some crossroads that was about 10 or 15 miles outside town. They were 150 years old. Think about what Texas was like 150 years ago. And those founding members were certainly all dead. But think about how deep that trajectory is. And so what I'm proposing to you today, though, is if you want to get here, you've got to move over to a new trajectory. And this is a really key piece. It gets harder the longer you wait. Because the more convinced you are that you need to move, and the longer you wait, the farther over that new trajectory is. Does that make sense? Are you guys tracking with me? Now think about your church. You need to think very practically about your church and about the things that are a part of your present that really are not where you want it to go. You with me? All right, now here's what I want you to see. It turns out that the present is actually the probable future of decisions that you made in the past. So when you decided, a few years ago, this was the conversation that, this is really embedded in a conversation that Shannon and I, the Lifeway guy, had on our way here this morning. What he was telling me is a very interesting strategy that he had to use Wednesday night as a way to kind of help parents who bring in their kids to Awanas or whatever they have, connect them. And he had some ideas about why he was doing it and the way he was doing it and all those kind of things. And I said, well, Shannon, here's what I believe. You need to be very intentional about the use of on-campus if your ultimate aim is to get people to meet off-campus, because they're tapped out on the weekend. They don't have any more room. And so what I said was, it's okay to start groups on campus. That's okay, because you're really leveraging a very important kind of psychosocial concept, which is sometimes we're dealing with people that had a very big struggle even coming to our church for the first time. When I got to Canyon Ridge, I met lots of people. I've met probably at least 10 or so who came out and told me they drove by this corner for 4 years, 3-4 years. They came by, they saw it, they didn't get out of their car, they didn't come into the parking lot. I've actually talked to 3 people who told me that they came to the parking lot more than once and didn't get out of their car. They went back home. Now, you may not be in that world. I bet you are here, though. I've been in Florida, you are. And so now, the reality for us is we said, hey, guess what? One of the ideas in the possible future is the idea of what if we leverage a great opportunity for people to meet on a topic that really made sense, like marriage. So, if you think about Laugh Your Way to a Better Marriage, or some kind of a curriculum that really is lighthearted, engaging, has some good content, but it's not hard for a person to imagine coming to that. Hey, I think, honey, don't you think we should do that? The wife says to the husband, don't you think we should sign up to come to that? So what if you had a way that they could come to that, do the 6 weeks, and that spun a group off that met off campus? What if you could do that? Now that's good. That's a good concept, we think. We've already started probably about 15 groups in the last year using that concept that meet off campus. Come to the thing, do the 6 weeks, adios. Here's your next curriculum. Where are you going to meet? That's good. That's part of this. That was an idea that was not part of the probable future, it was part of possible. Does that make sense? All right, but back to what I was saying, this trajectory, oh my gosh. If you're in a 91-year-old church, now not everything, because you've stopped using, although I did see a hymnal over there. I don't know, what meets in here on the weekend?
Classic service.
Classic service?
Special group, yeah.
So, and that's not bad. It just is what it is, right? So, but you think about, the sort of the legacy stuff that's part of your congregation. Think about it. The things that are from the past. They're not bad. They're just not likely to lead to here. And if your present is really, if the reality of your present is that you've connected 25% of your Easter number, then if you don't do anything different, when you get to here, you shouldn't be surprised that you're still having the same conversations about why we can't do this or that. Why are we stuck? Because of that. Does that make sense? Are you guys tracking? All right, so I think I'm getting close. I'm going to stop at this slide. I love Dilbert. Anybody hate Dilbert? Anybody really you're opposed to Dilbert? I love this slide. I just want to read it to you. The boss says, our differentiating value-added strategy is transformational change. And then he said, how is that? Does anyone feel different? And I love what Alice says. My urge to hurl has increased a little bit. That's what change feels like. Now you think about what we've talked about today. For most of us who are here today, the way that we are doing things right now, if we're really honest about what's happening, if we're honest about how many people we have truly connected, if we're honest about are we setting up leaders to where they really can invest in the members of their groups to where it is about life change? Is that the way that it is? Are we being honest? Are we really being honest about things like the way that we're coaching leaders, or the way that we're preparing leaders, or the way that, what is our expectation? I love the challenge from the book. I think you all got a copy from Transformational Groups from Eric Geiger and Tom Rainer. The challenge in there that is really so helpful, because it's research-based, the information they've developed, but what they determined is something like only 1 out of 3 pastors has a plan for what they want their groups to go through. 1 out of 3 or something like that. I don't remember the exact number. But the implication, what they were saying in there, is that means 2 out of 3 spend all this time preparing their message so that they give people a kind of a diet over a year. But only 1 out of 3 spends any time thinking about what they want their groups to do, to learn, to discuss, what experience they want their groups to have. And that's a very healthy conversation to have, trust me, because what we've said is, here's the menu, you can choose from the approved list. That's what some of us have said. Some of us have just said, hey, go to the bookstore. And they came back with The Secret, and that sort of thing. Okay, and then we say, well, look, that's the way it is. That's the present. We don't want it to be that way. We want it to be like this. That's about change, and change is uncomfortable. But the only way to get to the preferred future in your group ministry or in your congregation is to make careful, thoughtful decisions about where you want to go, and then set in motion a plan to get there. Now, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, in fact, I want to give you 6 minutes. By that clock, I got 10:24. I want you to come back at 10:30. I'm going to start at 10:30. What I'm going to do next is very important. And when we talk about really how to maximize a church-wide campaign, in my view, there's no better way to start groups, none, period. Starting groups is so much easier when you start with a church-wide campaign. And there's also no better way to move out into the community than the right campaign, period, end of story. So you got 5.5 minutes, get a drink, come back. Beautiful day in Miami, and so I don't want to hold you in here for us,
I have one quick announcement before Mark starts back up. Lifeway has a program to where if you're starting a new work, okay, doesn't matter which language, if you're starting a new work, Lifeway wants to help you out. And let me read these 4 things, and I'm going to give you a key phrase. You have to go through me. Just send me an email, call me, and I'll give you a code, and we'll give this to you. Now listen carefully. This is what we're going to do. For the first year, we will host the website of that church plant totally free. Okay? That's completely free. We'll design it, we'll host it. That's for a year. The second thing we'll do is for a small group, all ages, we will give you digital for free. Not paper, we'll give you digital for free. That's for 6 months. So what I encourage you to do is don't call us on day 1 of the church plant. Why? You have the least amount of people. Give yourself a couple of months before you send me an email. Let's say about 3 or 4 months into it. So you can maximize that 6 months free of literature for all age groups. Okay? Another thing we'll give to you for 1 year free is the ministry grid. Okay, the ministry grid is an online training tool. So for that church, again, don't call us. You can, because you're going to get the most money for your buck if you wait about 3 or 4 months into your church plant where you get some leaders and you want to train them. Now this is the best part, last. We'll give you $500 for any small group material. That's pretty amazing. So you can't say someone doesn't want to help you grow a church. So Gary's here with the DOM here in Miami, so any church that comes to him, if they contact me, I'll give them a code, and those are the 4 things we will give a church. So we'll help you with curriculum, digital for 6 months, plus we'll give you the $500. That means you can buy women's small group, men's small group, anything. We'll host your website, we'll design it for you, and most of all, we'll do the ministry agreement. That's for any church new plant. Does that sound good?
Awesome.
Okay, so let me give you my number again in case you came in late. 850-718-6379. We're not asking for any commitment from any church. We're just saying, if He's laying on your heart as a church to start a church plant, we will come beside you and hold your hand and help you with the educational side of ministry. All you have to do is call me or send me an email. Call me first, and then we'll get all those connected. Okay?
Great. See you in a bit. All right, so we're going to talk for the next few minutes about a church-wide campaign. And when I say that, when I use that term, my friends at Saddleback use the term, a spiritual growth emphasis is what they talk about when they're talking about a campaign. I think, the idea of a campaign is probably familiar to a lot of us. How many of you guys have done a church-wide campaign like 40 Days of Purpose? Has everybody done that or not? How many of you have not? You've never been part of a church that did that? Now, some of you didn't put your hand up either way. What is this? I know we're like in Miami, but come on, you need to get motivated. So how many of you have never, put your hand way up, you've never done anything like this? Okay, so it's about half and half. All right. 40 Days of Purpose, I think, was the most important development from the standpoint of connecting people, from the standpoint of helping people take spiritual next steps. I think really the idea behind that campaign was probably the most important thing that's happened in the church maybe in 50 years, 100 years. Because what it did was it gave the senior pastor the awesome opportunity to say, don't just come on the weekend. In order to get everything possible out of this, you need to be in a group that's using the curriculum that goes along with what I'm going to be teaching on the weekend. And if you get through this next 6 weeks and you look back and you say, I sure wish I would have done that, what a shame, what a crime. Don't do that. Take 6 weeks, join a group, be part of it. It's going to be transformational. A lot of times they would, senior pastors doing it would say, we coach them at Life Together to say things like, listen, what we're about to do as a church, you don't want to miss. Because 10 years from now, we're still going to be talking about these 6 weeks in the fall of 2014. And you don't want to miss that. So please do everything possible to get in a group. Now, I mentioned earlier that somewhere around 30,000 churches did 40 Days of Purpose. Since then, there's been so many campaigns. There's probably, right now, I would say 10 or 15 really good ones that come out every year. And some of them are, ones that you would never have heard of. Others are like, Rick Warren's newest one, Transformed, is, I think, going to be very much like 40 Days. I think there's going to be a huge number of churches that will do it because it's on a topic that really resonates with people. It's not, overtly, it is a spiritual growth emphasis, but it's on topics like health and, finances and things like that matter to ordinary people. And that's really huge. Now, let me kind of walk you through this idea. And what I would say as we're going through this is feel free, if you have a question, because I know one of the realities, in a room like this is I'm talking about something that you must have your senior pastor's engagement. You can't do a campaign if you don't have, the key person in the organization participating. because a campaign, at a minimum, a church-wide campaign features the alignment of a weekend message series with an adult small group study. At its basic level, it's got to have those two things. Now, some campaigns include resources that also align children and youth experiences. So when you look at the 10 or 15 campaigns that come out every year, only a few of them have, a fully age-graded experience to where what your preschooler is learning is the same as what the adults are learning, is the same as what's in the weekend. And, what I would suggest is, again, it is a huge advantage to be able, for the effect and impact of the campaign, for the senior pastor to stand on the edge of the platform and say, listen, you guys, we're going to have one conversation for the next 6 weeks. What your preschooler comes home talking about is the same thing that we're going to be talking about in the adult groups, is the same thing that we're going to be talking about on the weekend. That's huge, because now what it says is, guess what? Give me 6 weeks. Or now what I'm saying more and more is, if you'll commit to 6 times. Because in the mind of people, I was sharing this with Juan, and Lyman Coleman said a long time ago, Lyman was one of the founders of the North American small group movement. And, Lyman said 6 weeks is short enough for people to consider doing it. It's not long, it's just 6 weeks. But it's long enough to begin to establish some sense of connection. And that's important. That's really, really important. But you got to have the senior pastor, because he's the only one, or she's the only one, who can stand at the edge of the platform and say, I want everybody to do this. This is not, it's not like a lifetime, it's 6 times. And it's so helpful when we're all in one conversation, and it'll be a really fabulous time, and you'll be thinking about this for the next 10 years. This is going to be a great experience. We want everyone to do it. Campaigns sometimes include additional experiences like daily devotional readings, like, if you read The Purpose-Driven Life, that was the devotional for 40 Days of Purpose. And there's one kind of like that with Transformed, and many other campaigns have that kind of stuff, scripture memory, service opportunities, etc. So what I want to do now is roll through some primary questions and preliminary questions. And, as you're looking at your outline, you've got blanks to fill in. And so let me just kind of walk through this. Begin with the end in mind. Answer the 5 important questions. Is your senior pastor all in? Now, let me just say, again, I know we've only got one confessed senior pastor in the room. And so I know when you go back to your church, you're going to have to consider this possibility. But what I have found is, if you don't have them, you obviously can't do it, because you've got to have the weekend message in order to make this sale really work. Okay? Anything else is just a small group campaign. And you can do that kind of without their help. If you don't have that though, it's not worth doing. The second piece is, are your senior leaders all in? And, by that changes depending on the church, but it's very important, because if your senior leaders, just think about if your staff would possibly be approached by somebody who says, hey, are you doing a group? And they say no. Or if you've got key, very influential people in your congregation, and they're part of maybe an ABF or some kind of a study that's really it's kind of a smaller version of the weekend service, but it meets in a room like this, and it's in rows, and they conclude that, you guys, you all go on with the church-wide campaign thing. We're going to continue in our 15-month study of the book of Revelations, the closing chapters. That kind of thing. If they're going to opt out, but they're very influential people in your congregation, they need to be on board, or it's really not the same thing. And that's true whether you're talking about elders or a board or key people in the congregation. Very, very, very important. Now, this question, I think, is one of the most central, important, essential ideas, and you need to grasp this, because if you're going back to have the conversation with your pastor, this is really right at the heart of what you need to know and think about. Who do you hope to connect is really, really important. Now, if you think about it from the standpoint of, I would expect or hope that you guys have all read The Purpose-Driven Life, or you're kind of somewhat familiar with that concept. And what I would say is, when you think about the 40 Days of Purpose, you should think things like, when they launched that, who could have an interest in that? What kind of person could have an interest? In 2002, when they launched that, the Purpose-Driven Life was on every end cap at Walmart, Barnes & Noble, you name it. That book was so visible. Rick Warren was on Larry King Live and Oprah and on Fox, and every news show and every magazine kind of show did a feature on Rick. Okay, so if you think about, and then just think about the topic. Everyone, the idea of purpose, the idea that I might have a purpose, that there's a reason for me being here. That's not a Christian idea. That everybody has that idea. Is there meaning to life? People have been talking about that way before, before Jesus. That's a common thread that runs throughout cultures, is this notion that I might have a purpose. So when you think about things like, who do you hope to connect? Remember, when I was drawing the imaginary circle out here with the square, what I would hope that you would come into is some sense of that group. Who would we like to connect? Who needs to be connected in a group? Is it just the usual suspects that are part of the existing close, square? Or do we really hope to connect the people who go to our church but they're not connected? They're not part of a group. Or do we hope to connect even beyond what our current boundaries are, to where we could actually expect to walk across the street and say to our neighbor, would you, I know this sounds crazy, I don't know if I was off my medication for the day or what happened, but somehow my wife volunteered us to host a discussion about this book that's out. And I don't know if you guys would want to come over the very first week. We're going to watch a video of that Rick Warren guy, and it's a short video, and then we're going to discuss one part of the book. Would you guys want to even come over once? We're going to have hamburgers and pie, and
Yes.
You're in. You know what I'm saying? That was the discussion in 2002. Would you consider doing this? And they knew confidently. One of the things that's really important to point out is the people you're asking to host a group, the people you're asking to think about leading a group, they care about that. 4 or 5 years ago, Bill Hybels, another very prominent pastor in the United States, came out with a study, a church-wide campaign called, two. One was called Just Walk Across the Room, which was a great evangelism training kind of thing, an experience that you could show people how to use and they could learn how to share their faith and things like that. It's great. Well done. Very, very well done. He came out with another one 3 or 4 years ago called The Power of the Whisper. It's about prayer. Another great, great one. But just imagine walking across the street to invite your neighbor to come over and join a discussion about, first of all, evangelism. That ain't not going to happen. You're not doing that. That's not happening. And even the power of the whisper, the idea of prayer, is not a real hot topic for your neighbor who doesn't go to church. Purpose is. 3 years ago now, Craig Groeschel, Life Church, came out with a study that was called, Weird. Based, it kind of came with a book and a whole, curriculum that went from cradle to, adult, and it was really well done. Weird, the gist of it is that idea of there's a wide road and a narrow road, and everybody's on the wide road, and only a few get on the narrow road. You know that verse, that passage. So what Craig took from that is, look, normal is the wide road. Normal is over-leveraged financing that actually gives you a loan for 120% of the appraised value of your property on the strength of the idea that it might go up in value. And if it doesn't, we have a balloon payment that's due in 5 years. That's normal. Normal is, hey, if your marriage isn't working out, move on. No fault divorce, boom shakalaka, then you're on to the next one. That's normal. Normal is, and so Craig identified 5 ways that in North America today, or at least the United States, this is normal. But clearly, and this is totally evident to unchurched people, to non-Christian people, they get the metaphor. Normal does not work. It didn't work. Look at what happened in the real estate market, and look at what happened from the standpoint of the damage that divorce does to children and all those kind of things. Just look at that. Obviously, normal doesn't work. Want to learn what's not normal? We're going to have a 5-week discussion at our house about these 5 topics. I know it sounds bizarre. My wife signed me up. Would you guys want to come over? Totally, that's a game changer because they care about that. Everybody cares. Don't have to be a Christian, don't have to be a person of faith. Everybody gets the metaphor. Does that make sense? So when you think about who you hope to connect, this determines the study you should select. Now, let me just tell you, Pete Wilson, a friend of mine at a church in Nashville, Pete's study that came out in January from Lifeway is on hope. Now, we've elected a president twice on the banner of hope. You know why? People care about that. They don't have to be Democrats. It doesn't make any difference. People care about hope, and they don't have to be a Christian. So Pete's curriculum, the curriculum that Lifeway put out, I'm not sure, did they give you, they gave you guys copies of the Bible Studies for Life, one, like a sample one, didn't they, Todd? Which one they give you?
We got Let Hope In back here.
Okay, Let Hope In is great, okay? And the concept, if you guys didn't get that, did everybody get Let Hope In? Let Hope In is a really great study. It's available from, early childhood all the way into adults. It comes with an outline that you can use for a weekend message series. Pete's got a very compelling book, trade book, that is really good and goes right along with it, kind of almost like the 40 Days of Purpose did with a purpose-driven life devotional. There's a lot of crossover. That's a really cross-cultural concept. You don't have to be a Christian to care about hope. And so, who you hope to connect, though, determines the study that you select. And let me just say, too, are you guys familiar with the Saddleback Circles? Do you know what I mean by that? Saddleback Circles is really a good, very good way of understanding all the people in your community. And if you think about a large circle, and outside that largest circle is the community, those are people that have never been to your church. They might know that you're there, possibly, but really they don't care. They're in your community, but they're not part of it. Inside that are 4 other circles. And I just want to point out that, what they talk about is this tighter, narrower circle called the congregation. And inside that is a group of people that they call the committed. And inside that is the core. So congregation in, what I talk about is these are people that really they're part of your church. They may be serving occasionally they may be really committed, they might be leading a team, you know, that kind of thing. They're people that are inside the congregation committed or core, they're giving at least on an occasional basis all the way into their giving sacrificial. So they're, you know, somewhere in that congregation. In between the congregation and the community is this piece that you think of, that Saddleback thinks of as being the crowd. And those are the people I was talking about earlier, that they do come to your church, but they don't come all the time. And they're almost never connected in any meaningful way. They know where it is. They know what time it starts a lot of times. They are in the habit of coming maybe once a month, you know, a few times a year. They know what time, how to get there and where to park and those kind of things, but they're part of the crowd. And they are the explanation of why you can average this number for your average adult attendance and this number for Easter. It's not that everybody brought, you do know that, right? The difference between your average adult attendance and your holiday attendance like Easter and Christmas is not that everybody brought a friend. It's that everybody came on the same weekend. And you have some first timers. But the biggest reason is they all came at the same time because there's motivation. All right, so when you're thinking about who you hope to connect, you could be thinking about the community and, you know, purpose, hope, you know, the idea that there's a normal and a weird, you know, that's actually a pretty outreach oriented. So I would say community or crowd, either one of those would connect. Would there be a reason to think, we really want to get everyone on the same page? The people that are part of our regular congregation, they're part of our deal, they would really benefit from walk across the room. See what I'm saying? And you probably could get them to do it. These people, not these people, they don't care. But these people, they could benefit from a study on prayer or a study on the spiritual kind of devotional practices or something like that. That would be good for them. And they might do it. But don't confuse the fact that what you choose in the way of study definitely determines who you can connect. This is another key piece. If number 3 was important, this is huge. Who can lead a group is a very central question. And we've talked about it already, so I'm not going to go back into it, but just think about the difference between the outcome of who can lead a group if you require them to be members and who they know versus they only have to have 2 friends. You know, what a difference. But, you know, there's no problem free. And all of your requirements, you know, I mean, I was having a discussion, one of the churches that I'm consulting with right now, I sat down in a meeting. It was kind of the first meeting of a conversation, and there were a number of different staff that were in this meeting. And I just kind of, because I like to know this, I said, well, how do you determine who can lead a group in your church currently? And they said, well, that's easy. You have to be a member, and you need to be a tithing member. Okay, yeah, exactly. You are from that kind of church, aren't you, brother? So, you know, I mean, so, you know, you needed to be a member, and you needed to be a tithing member. And I said, oh, that's interesting. How do you know that they're tithing? And they said, well, they have to be giving at a level that we assume is a tithe. So, you know, there's some oversight, there's some, you know, monitoring going on. And I said, oh, okay, that's good. And the person, one of the people that was in the meeting was the person in their congregation. This is a church of about 2,000. They had a gal in the meeting that was kind of like worked with the data and would know certain things like giving levels. Not about specific people, but just, you know, how many people do we have at this level and that level. And we had already established that they really needed to be able to connect about something like 1,600 people were unconnected. 1,600 adults. And so I said, now I know what their leadership requirements are. What do you have to be? And I looked over at the database girl, and I said, the woman, and I said, okay, help me. Do you know the data enough? We would need to get around 160 new leaders. You got 160 people that give at a tithing level? And she laughed. And I said, well, I think my work is done. You guys need to figure that out, because as long as you think to be a leader, you have to be a member and you have to give at a tithing level, this game is over. And while you're having that discussion in your head or on your team or whatever, you need to remember what we've already talked about, which is unconnected people are always one tough thing away from never being at your church again, period. End of story. That's it. So what do you want to do? You want to spend the next 2 or 3 years helping the people who are not, they're members, but they're not tithing members, get them ready so that you can get over here? Or what are you going to do about the number of people that will come and go in the next 2 or 3 years? Because your insistence on this, I get it. I appreciate that, because what you know is whatever you want to happen in the lives of the members has to happen in the lives of the leaders first. So I get it. I understand why you're motivated that way. But you are essentially flipping off the other unconnected people that won't get connected in the next 3 years. In Vegas, I can say that. You get what I'm saying. Your choice of who can lead ought to be informed by who you hope to connect. And let me just say, remember earlier when we talked about no problem free? I'm not saying you don't do things to kind of mitigate the problem set that you discover. And so, for example, at our campaign that we did in the fall, we said too, anybody can pick up the curriculum. If you've got a few friends, love it. Sign up, here's how to do it. In our case, come to the orientation. The first 15 minutes are for everybody. And if you want to have a group that's open to new people that we might send you, you got to stay for the other 45 minutes. And you got to fill out part B of the application. Because if we're going to send people to you, now we have a responsibility that you not be an axe murderer if we can figure it out. Or you know what I'm saying? So we're doing things to mitigate the risk, but the main thing that we're saying is, hey, if you've got a couple friends who will come over to your house, we love the fact that you're going to be listening to our pastor for 12 and a half minutes, 6 times. And then you're going, in your conversation, you're going to discuss the curriculum that we've designed that will take them very productively through what we did this last fall. Was an in-house study that was focused on 6 of the very best conversations or incidents that happened in Jesus' ministry that involved grace. So, prodigal son, woman at the well, woman caught in adultery, the woman that broke the perfume over Jesus' feet. And we chose those very intentionally because what we wanted people in Las Vegas to have is the opportunity to know that, God loved them. He did this for them. And we wanted everybody to know that. Not just the friends of the people that we could say they're members and they're giving at a tithing level. We wanted everybody to know that. And we had a couple hundred people say, I'd like to do that. And we had about 100 of them say, I'd like to be eligible for you to send me people. So we had 100 that just picked up the stuff, did it with their friends. It was awesome. We followed up with them. We gave them a way that they could take a next step. But we also had about 100 who said, no, we need some help. We don't know a lot of people. Okay, great. Stay for the other 45 minutes, turn in part B of the application. They met individually with a coach before we gave them the green light to be part of what we were doing. It was great. Mitigate the problems. Okay, so who can lead a group? Very important piece. Now, number 5, what would you call a win? Okay, this is very important because when you're thinking about a campaign, when you're thinking about a church-wide campaign, remember what I said. This, I believe, is the number 1 best thing that's happened from the standpoint of church growth and connecting people in 50 years, maybe 100 years, 200. The idea of leveraging a weekend message series plus a small group study, huge, huge, huge. So important. So ready to roll and be able to connect hundreds of people who will be in a curriculum that you can choose. But you need to decide what you're going to call a win. Remember what I said when I was working at Life Together, we talked with hundreds of churches that had this experience. They started all these groups, and 6 weeks later, they were right back here. You know, and it was a memory. It was a good memory, but it didn't do what they really wanted to do. Now, we actually talked with over 1,500 churches and surveyed them about their experience. And we discovered an interesting thing. There were 2 actual groups. Some of them had this experience, and some of them had this experience. And they had more start than they sustained, but they sustained a good number. And when we started drilling down and find out what they did 2 very simple things. The churches that launched a lot and sustained a good percentage did 2 things. They gave them a curriculum to do next that was similar to what they started with. So, DVD driven. They gave them a curriculum that was easy to use. You know, and they gave them a follow-up that was also easy to use. You know, they gave them a curriculum that was similar to what they started with. And the second thing, and it was so intuitive, it was like a no-brainer. They gave them a person to walk alongside them who would connect with them on a weekly basis, who kind of knew a little bit more than the host. That's all. But the difference of those 2 things gave them the ability to sustain about 70% of what they launched on average. The other people, rocket launch all the way back down. So when you think about a win for a church-wide campaign, what I would say is a win is not this. You know, a win, and this is what we were talking about, is 6 times is not enough to really form the connective tissue that people need in order to be known. And until people are known, they're going to be with you and then gone. One tough thing, unconnected, boom, out the door. And that's not what we want. What we want is we want them to be connected. We want them to be known so that really they can be cared for. We want that. But we also ultimately want them to grow in Christ. And life change happens in circles. Life change happens when people are in this dialogue and they have an opportunity to pray together and know each other over time. All right, so we talked about this already a little bit in terms of topic and timing. Choose the study that you will use, and this determines who will say yes to hosting as well as who will say yes to attending. Now, we've kind of already referenced this a little bit, but let me just go back and fill in a couple thoughts. When you say, we're going to do this study, and let's say 40 Days of Purpose, Rick Warren, out of everything, you know, I mean, people know who he is. They may or may not like him, but they know who he is, and they've seen the book and all those kind of things, okay? When you say, here's the study that we're going to use, the people that you're hoping will say yes to opening their home 6 times, they know what that's about, and they know that it's about purpose. And I think they begin to think, well, I actually could sort of blame this on my wife, and I could say that, you know, she signed me up and we could have hamburgers and pie and those kind of things, and people would come, you know, I mean, because they can rationalize that. On the flip side, if you tell them that the study is about prayer, they're reframing that and they're thinking about going across the street to their neighbor. With me? What I talk about a lot of times is there's an easy, hard continuum. And on the one end, of this is, studies or topics, and pastors know this too. When you choose a certain topic for a message series, you are deciding who will come. When you choose this one, it's easy. I'd love to hear about that. I want to know about that. They'll come. So purpose, hope, all those kind of things. If you do a 6-weeker on judgment or hell, ain't nobody coming. And they're not going to they are for sure not bringing their friend if you're going to do a 6-week study on, judgment in the Bible. They're not coming. We did some consulting work with a church in Dallas when I was at Life Together, and I showed up after they had chosen the series they were going to do, but before they actually implemented a launching strategy. And and I said, well, Gary, I know that you're going to do this study, and they had actually hired Life Together to design the study and everything like that. It was a great topic. It was about the power of the Holy Spirit in our daily life. Who do you think cares about that? Do you think the neighbor care about that? First of all, it was called Catch the Wind, which was sort of a weird title anyway, but they had the idea of a boat on the water and sailboat, wind, Holy Spirit, all those kind of things. It was based on the book of Acts. It was a great study. But I said, Gary, here's what I'm going to be asking you to consider doing. Could you imagine going over to your neighbor that lives across the cul-de-sac and inviting him to that? And he said, I didn't see that coming. I guess not. And I said, well, it's too late to redo this. So what we're going to be doing is focusing our connecting strategy on the people that are already part of your church and could benefit from that. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so that made sense to him. The next year they did, for their next fall campaign, they did a study called 24. This was in 2005 or 6 or so. 24, very popular. And it was about kind of a similar sort of thing, but it was about the action-packed life when you're really living sort of on the edge and you're involved in making a difference and stuff like that. It was a great study. And then he could invite his neighbor. Does that make sense? So what the study is about will determine who will say yes to hosting, because if it's about something that I can't imagine talking to my neighbor about, I'm not saying yes. I'm not going to respond. If it's something that is good, I'll say yes. But it also matters to the person who is considering attending. Does this make sense? So, in other words, if I walk over to my neighbor and I characterize it as about purpose, they'll respond. With me? All right. So now, let me kind of push on. I already talked about this, the idea of choosing a follow-up study before you even begin. This is really important, and so few churches do this. So Todd, you guys are thinking about doing a study. You guys are thinking about doing a study. If you're thinking about doing a campaign, one of the most important things you can do is choose what you're going to give your group leaders to do next before you even start. It's kind of like, if you're a Formula One race car driver, you're a NASCAR driver, you're not thinking about the turn when you get to the turn. You're thinking about the turn in advance. And in fact, when you go into that turn, you're actually thinking about how you want to come out of the turn, because that sets up what happens next. This is like that. Okay, so we talked already about this idea that this is actually one of 2 key factors that determine sustainability. Because, if you've ever done a church-wide campaign, one of the things is that it is a lot of work. It's not easy. It's hard. But the potential fruit is amazing. And the right campaign done the right way produces results that are really unforgettable. And people really will be talking about it 10 years later saying, and I am so thankful that I got in a group. Elders 10 years from now will say, I came to Christ in that series. People that are key instrumental leaders in your congregation will look back and they will actually say, that's where I got connected. Until that time, I was a bystander. If we hadn't done that, who knows where I'd be. That's what you want. And so, but that's about sustainability. That's about connecting and continuing on. Now, this is very important. Choose the season that best matches your objective, who you hope to connect, and what you will call a win. And let me I'll be quick on this and just say, there are really several pretty good times a year to have a campaign. There are 2 great times. You know, the fall, I don't care what geographic area I'm in, the fall campaign is the #1 opportunity because it gives you an opportunity in August to really begin to ramp and do things, you know, like for example, in our last 2 campaigns at Canyon Ridge, we used pretty much the whole month of August for my pastor to stand on the edge of the platform and say, listen, you guys, if you have a heart for unconnected people, you know, and here in our church, we've got a lot of people that are not part of the group. If you have a heart for people like that, you know, if on your street you have a heart for people that they're really far from God, if you have a heart for those people and you'd be willing to open your home 6 times and serve some very simple snacks and tell a few of those people, you could host a group. We used the whole month of August to very strategically go after as large a number of hosts as we could. Then we used the first couple weeks of September to give those hosts an opportunity to connect people, get them ready, and then we launched on about the 3rd weekend of September into, you know, a couple of campaigns that we produced in-house. That is a huge opportunity. Contrast that with the second best window to launch groups, which is kind of end of January, first part of February. Okay, in that season right there, you could think about it without being a sociologist. There is plenty of motivation at the beginning of the year in every city across the country to change. You know, good Lord, if 2014 is not better than 2013, I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm going to get my finances in order. I'm going to do some things to eat healthier and run and exercise. I'm going to work on my marriage. I'm going to do all those kind of things. That's what they're thinking at the end of December and the first week or 2 of January. It is really prime time opportunity to be able to say, hey, you want to build a firm foundation for your family? You want to have a different end of the year in 2014 than you have in 13? I want to encourage you to join us in a group. Get connected. You know, be part of this series that we're going to do. The difference between end of January and first part of February, the difference between that season and the fall is you're not going to want to talk about being a host in December, which is when you'd need to talk about it to make that happen. So it requires a little different sort of massaging, tweaking in order to get the campaign idea to work. And then following Easter legitimately is a great opportunity too. Easter has one real drawback. Summer is about 6 to 12 weeks away, depending on when Easter falls. And summer, I don't care if you're in Miami, Las Vegas, Houston, Chicago, doesn't make any difference. Summer is a time when people say, that was great. We'll see you in the fall. You know, see, I think there's even a song about see you in September. From back in the day. All right, so those are the 3 key pieces. Because of the time, here's what I'm going to do. I've got a series of articles from my blog that go through this very well and talk about things like how to develop a timeline. I gave you a little hint of it a minute ago when I said in August we did this. You know, we recruited hosts, and in September we gave those hosts a way to connect with other people, and then we started the campaign. What I didn't say is way back in May and April, we started talking internally about the campaign. And we recruited people as coaches so that when we got to the campaign itself and the host sign up had happened and then we did some orientations and we were able to connect. Remember I said the people that signed up to host but wanted some help getting some members, those people, in order to allow them to get some help getting some members, we had them meet with a coach. Well, that means you got to recruit the coaches back here and do the training and the thinking with them and get it all ready. And so there's a planning piece to this timeline. And if you'll email me, it's mark@markhowelllive.com. I'll email you back the link to the page that already exists on the blog, and it has all of this information. There's a piece in the timeline about recruiting members to groups, and you can kind of see how this is. You know, one of the things that I sort of hinted at is that one of the realities for all of our churches is that we look at the average adult attendance, and we know intuitively that it's not the same people every week. We get that. You know, we know there are some people that are there 3-4 weeks a month. But we also know that there are people that, you know, they're the ones that if your senior pastor, you know, goes to the grocery store, there are people that will see you, and you can tell by the way they're looking at you that they recognize you, but you don't have a clue who that is. You might sort of think, I think I've seen them before, but wait a minute, was that, you know, are they the barista, or are they, you know, who is that? So what we want to think about is how do we recruit broadly? Well, the information that I have will help you with that piece. And then the host briefings or orientations, this is really important, and this is what I was saying. So we use August to get them to say yes to hosting, opening my home 6 times, so we're using August. Then for a lot of those people, they need some really basic, just very basic stuff about how you start a group. And you can do that a lot of different ways. You can have a physical orientation that they come to, and it might be an hour, it might be 30 minutes, it might be 75. Or, as we've tested, Saddleback and others, you could film that little bit of coaching, break it up into YouTube size delivery, and make it to where they could get that online. There's a lot of us around the country that are testing that idea. I would just say, you need to choose the set of problems you'd rather have. That's what it comes down to. If you want certainty, you know, if you want to make sure that not only are they not an axe murderer, but their favorite pastor is not Oprah, then you need to consider, do you want a live orientation where they could sit down with a coach, or do you want, you know, to take that chance? Does that make sense? All right, so I think, all right, then you're recruiting hosts, and then you're recruiting and training campaign coaches. All of this I have on a page that is very packed with information. So, hello, how did it do that? I have no idea. All right, so let me do this. we're going to need to drive somewhere, but we have a little bit of time right now, right? I hope this has been helpful. Let me do this. If you have questions or you want to ask some things about maybe like the periphery of what we talked about, I'm here for a few minutes. I would love to talk with you. I would especially love to engage with you if you've got questions and you want to email me. I'm good with that. Now, I do this kind of work where I sort of do the workshop kind of thing, but mostly what I do is I write 5 days a week at markhowelllive.com, and I have almost 1,400 articles about small group ministry that I've written over the last 6 years. And they're covering everything from church-wide campaigns to coaching to leader development to choosing curriculum and all those kind of things, and it's searchable. markhowelllive.com is the biggest thing that I do, but I also work as a consultant, usually with about 5 to 10 churches around the country at any one time. And I'd love to help you if I could. So thanks for coming. I hope this has been helpful. And if you have questions, I'm here. I'd love to chat. Don't feel like you can't ask your question, and love to talk with you guys. So hope this has been helpful.